Currently in this semester, I am teaching 4 classes. That is just 1 class more than my usual 9 credit workload for each semester. So it's really big burden for a teacher or professor who has been teaching usually 6 credit or 9 credit, but for some reasons I have to teach 12 credit in this semester. It's really exhausting. You can imagine that you should talk about something that you don't know well for more than 3 hours a day and 4 days a week. That's really bad in your life. And I'm doing that exactly. So I'm really exhausted. But so I announced in the other undergraduate classes that I will not record any of my lecture because recording all of my lectures, uploading it in the prompt time for every classes will be definitely exceed my workload or my manpower. But for this class only, I will just try check if I can do that because this class is pretty special. It is spoken in English, and I know my English is not perfect, and I know your English is also not perfect. So we have some communication problem in sometimes. From my previous examples or experience in the last year, I taught 1 SIS class and I also taught 1 ABIS class. The students were all awesome and I really loved them in the atmosphere of my courses last year. But I also discovered some problems in communication, or I was sometimes lost in translation. So I just need to do these things just for myself. Just make sure myself that I make some mistake during the lecture. So I really want to make it up. And the best way to do that is to record my video and upload 4 things to the cyber campus so a student can check which part is wrong and which part is right, or if you miss some part, then you can just rewatch the lecture so that you can just make it up by yourself from the student side. I think that's the best way we can do that. Just economize our time and maximize our overlapped goals. So I will just do that, but I'm not sure if I can do that until the end of this semester. I will just do that if I'm available or I have enough energy to do that. But in some point during a semester, in every semester, I reach a point where I'm exhausted. It may be just last week of the semester, but sometimes it happens during the middle of the semester. And if it happens, then I cannot do that anymore, so I will stop recording the video and upload the file to the cyber campus. But this is just second week, so I think I'm okay for right now. So I'm just doing these things. Right. So from now on, since we are in the first class of second week of the semester, we will start the real things of this course. And we start with the balance of payment. And I'm pretty sure that majority of this group will definitely be familiar with this concept, because I guess I didn't check each student's history of course record because it takes a lot of time, but I'm pretty sure that you might have studied a similar concept from your international finance class or even macroeconomics class, right? No? Right. Okay, no communication between us right now. So that's okay, we are still in the second week, so we will get familiar with each other and we'll definitely be free for sure to do better, definitely. So I assume that if you are smart enough, or if you diligently tracking a kind of guidelines offered by the department from the first year to the fourth year, because you guys are fourth year, I also assume that, then you will definitely have been going through at least some part of the balance of payment. But I will not skip any of important explanations, even in this fourth year class, because I also assume that really few of you guys have a kind of missing link between your principles of economics level of knowledge and this fourth year upper division class of a little bit more specified conceptual study of that. So, and since we are still in the second week, I will a little bit slow down the speed of the lecture because we need some time to get familiar with each other. You need the time to adjust a kinds of teaching style of mine, or you also need to, warm up your body and brain to be suitable for the higher level of education in the economics field. And I also need a kinds of time to adjust myself to your style. I don't know you have a style also, but I need a time to get familiar with your faces or your kinds of participation style. I can see that. I can see how you're understanding a kinds of concept when I explain that. Your face tells everything, so don't worry about that. So I need some feedback from your side as well. So I will slow down the speed of lecture in the second week and the third week to have some time for the warming up or the brainstorming. And after that, after we make sure that that's enough, okay, so we can boost up a little bit to get a lot of things as soon as possible, then we can a little bit of speed up the lecture of the speed, okay? So, as I already explained in the first week, the balance of payment is the starting point to understand the bigger picture of this course. We draw out the bigger picture in the last time, you remember that? Our final ultimate goal is to understand open economic macroeconomic mechanism. Country versus country, or a system or the group of nations, they interact a lot of things financially or in just international trade. But in every economic activities happen between the nations or just groups of nations, we need a transaction. And this course is all about that kind of transactions. How the modern world transaction does it happen? By money, right? You can send money to get something, or you can receive some money to sell your goods or services. So the money is the key kinds of part in their international transaction as domestic transactions. But there is a kind of another scope to understand the international dimensions of transactions, and that's a starting point of that. So we will start with the balance of payment, and we can confirm that the balance of payment is a part of international transactions. That's really key to understand the flow of transactions in just one paperwork. And we will realize that exchange rate is another key functional version or dimension to understand the international transactions. So we will jump to exchange rate market, the foreign exchange market. Then we will deep a little bit further how that type of exchange rate are determined in the market or from some non-market factors. That's the first half of this course. So when we finish that type of study, we will go to the midterm, and after that, we'll extend or apply that type of knowledge to the macroeconomic foundations. So I'm not sure what kind of things you studied from your macroeconomics, the intermediate level of macroeconomics, but from my own course in the intermediate level of macroeconomics, from my own department, I usually teach GDP things or inflation things or some interest rate things, but only in the closed economic version. Because if we extend that type of macroeconomic knowledge to the open economic dimension, it becomes suddenly really complicated or complex. So I just stopped explaining all of these macroeconomic aspects of the economy in the closed economic version. Then one semester we finish it. So I assume that, I think your teacher was definitely better than me, but your teacher was also maybe having some trouble in explaining the open economic dimension of the macroeconomic phenomenon from your second year or the third year. So I assume that your knowledge about the international dimension of macroeconomics is somewhat limited, and this course will be definitely a complement for that type of limited knowledge, right?
The mic doesn't work.
I believe it works, but it works really badly. So that's my guess. So I think there is I got a PhD in economics, but I'm also good at engineering electronics, so I'm pretty good at that, everything. Right, so we start with the balance of payment. I will give you just basic knowledge about that because BOP is not the most important concept in this course, but this is basic preliminary knowledge to understand it further or deeper in the open economy macroeconomics. So I will just casually check if you understand some of this concept or if you casually exemplify some part of BOP by yourself, because we will draw out a lot of examples and the BOP is all about the examples, so we can definitely do that. So this is kinds of plans of this chapter. We'll firstly check the definition of the BOP and how to measure the BOP. And we'll also check the recent trend of the BOP by using example of the United States, but actually this statement is wrong because we use examples of the United States more than 10 years ago, because I just adapted the good examples from the old textbook that I just received maybe 6 years or 7 years ago from the published company. But I couldn't find out the better recent version of the examples to show you as a good example of the BOP. So I will use it anyway, but that's not the perfect version of the example, I can tell you right now. And lastly, we'll discuss a little bit about the problem of the BOP. BOP concept is pretty good to understand international transaction flow, kinds of tracking, but it is not the perfect one. And the theory of BOP does not work perfectly in the practice or the reality in the global economy. So we will discover that there has been always imbalance in the BOP. In theory, the BOP should be zero for any time, but in reality, that is not happening for any country for any year. So we can just briefly discuss about the potential reasons why this imbalance of the balance of payment happens, also by using the example of the United States. So that's the kinds of plan for this chapter. And I again tell you, this chapter is just warming up chapter. This is not the most important part, but we just need to know some part of that to study the real things. My targeting level of the knowledge. So I assume that some of you are already familiar, so you might be really bored in this time, maybe, and then maybe next time. But I just proceed this chapter for those who did not take this course in your previous years, in the second year or third year. You should have taken this course according to the guideline by the ABIS, if there is any guys who made guidelines, and that should be me, but I didn't do that, so I'm not sure if there's any other guys who made guidelines for it. But anyway, so if you follow that kinds of fake guideline, then you should definitely have taken this course. But if you didn't take this course, then I'll explain a little bit more about the really important definitions also. So here is a definition of the balance of payment. Balance of payment. So did you guys take the basic accounting course?
Yes.
Right? So in your accounting course, there was debit and credit, right? Which means that it is called a double booking system in recording of the transaction, and the balance of payment is something like that. Balance of payment also has the double booking system or double bookkeeping system. So it has credit and debit side. So it records every transactions at the international region and at the nation level. So if a firm transactions something with the other company in the foreign country, it was not recorded in the BOP. The BOP aggregates all of that and they make just one number for a specific part, specific naming, or specific category. So the BOP is the double bookkeeping system or the summary of statement for international transactions at the nation level with the specified recipient or the resident for a specified period of time. So there are two things to note about the definition of the BOP. First, it is a variable of the flow because it will record every international transactions for a specific period of time. So it is not a stock variable, but it is a flow variable. Do you differentiate flow variable from the stock variable? Okay. No. Everyone just looking down, so that's okay. So flow variable captures all economic activities in a specific time or period. For instance, how about the GDP? GDP is the market value of the production in a nation for a specific time or period, maybe last year or maybe last quarter. That's a flow variable. How about exchange rate? Exchange rate is the stock variable. Exchange rate is the exchange rate between maybe Korean won and the next dollar now or a minute ago or at a specific time. Okay? If you pick a specific time, then it will be a stock variable. If you estimate or if you observe all the economic activities happening during specific time or period, it will be the flow variable. Okay? Okay, here is specific time. There are lots of things here going on. The flow variable estimate every specific economic activities happening during this time. Exchange rate, the same. If somebody asks you what's the exchange rate between Korean won and the US dollar, then you can answer that at the 2023 December 31 noon o'clock there was 1,101 dollar at a specific time. Just a moment, right? So that's a stock variable. So in estimating or in observing the stock variable, the past history is not important. You can just observe the situation of what it is. But if you estimate or observe the flow variable, specific time period, history of activities, all of activities are important to be observed. Okay? And the BOP is a flow variable, which means that to estimate the BOP, you need to be ordered or you need to specify specific time period you can observe. Usually it's a 1 year unit, but sometimes a quarter, sometimes a month. But if you narrow down the time period observation for a quarter or to a month, it is really hard to observe every economic activity because there is a time delay from the point when that economic activity is actually happening, and there is another point of time that you observe the economic activity. There is a time lag between those two. It takes a month sometimes, it takes 3 months or something. So every economic activities can be observed by the government agencies or the other public sector guys, but there is a special time lag. So usually the BOP has been announced a year term. That's the first thing you should note about the BOP. The second part, there's pretty much important thing is that BOP does not include every single resident in a nation. So defining resident in a nation is pretty much important to estimate the BOP. How about estimating South Korea's BOP here? I'm South Korean, so if I buy American stock market here, it will be definitely counted in a part of the BOP. If Aziz, he's definitely in the South Korea, right? Okay. If Aziz do the same thing like me, buying American stock here in South Korea, it will be also counted as a BOP of the South Korea because now he's living in South Korea. But if a government agency who is belonging to the IMF in the New York does buy some stake from South Korean stock market for a specific purpose of the IMF, it won't be counted as the BOPs of the United States or South Korea. So we need to exclude international institutions activities like IMF, OECD, World Bank. That kinds of economic transactions will not be included in the BOP for any nation. Because, for instance, IMF, International Monetary Fund, does not have nationality. Is that institution the American institution? Because the headquarters of IMF is now, I guess it is located in the New York City. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the headquarters of the IMF is located in the United States. So all of the public agencies working for IMF are now living in the United States. So as a single person, like United citizenship or the other citizenship, all of the other economic activities they do will be definitely counted in the GDP of the United States, or if they do some international transactions, their activities will be recorded in the BOP. But IMF, as an international institution, they will buy or sell some international assets, or they will also send some money to the other country for that public purpose. These kinds of actions will not be counted in any part of the BOP, in any nation. So it doesn't mean the BOP only accounts for the market-based activity. It will also include a lot of non-market activities as well. I will explain a little bit later in these pages. But we will be pretty much careful about defining a nation in estimating the balance of payment by excluding some special agent that is not included in any of the nations in the world. Okay. That's another part. You can a little bit of brainstorm your understanding on the BOP. Any question? All right. So, by carefully reading the definition of the BOP, the one keyword comes in your mind should be international transaction, right? That's the main difference between the BOP and the GDP, or BOP or the other normal companies accounting double booking system. So, international transactions should be also carefully defined. And from my textbook that I adopted to write down this PT, the textbook says that international transactions can be defined by the exchange of a good, service, or an asset. So asset could be a little bit complex to some of you guys. Between the resident, so resident is defined here, of one nation and the resident of another nation. And resident does not mean a citizenship of the nation. If you live in the United States, then your economic transactions, international transactions will be included in the United States. If you're South Korean living in Saudi Arabia, for instance, then your economic activities will be definitely a part of Saudi Arabia, not the South Korea. But it will be also really complicated. I will explain that. Why estimating EOP is not that easy work. A good or a service can be a part of international trade. Casual, usual, textbook style international trade. You can simply imagine that. But the transactions in asset can be a little bit not much straightforward because it is ineligible. And even few of you guys might not know how to trade financial asset internationally. That's pretty much complicated, and it is making sense because transactioning foreign asset freely has really short history in South Korea or the other countries. When I was the graduate student, so should we stop first? Fortunately, we can do it. Sorry, unfortunately we came back. So when I was a graduate student in the United States, the first year was 28, so 2008, the year of financial crisis happening in the United States. Definitely, economic crisis made a negative impact to everyone in the United States, and I was one of them because I was studying at the state university, not a private university, but the public university in one of the states, the United States. So the most important financial resource for the university, the type of state university in America, was definitely a student tuition fee and the taxation. And the tax revenue by the state government has been definitely reduced due to the economic crisis because people living in the state did not spend their money. And also the tuition fee was also reduced too. So with that shrinking financial asset of the university where I studied, the jobs inside the university, the number of jobs inside the university was also decreasing. So for 1 or 2 semesters, I didn't get any job inside the university, so I requested my mom to send some money for the survival or something. So she went to a bank where she was the most familiar with, but it took more than 2 days in order to complete that kinds of transaction of money from South Korea to the United States. My mom had to write down a statement of some promise that this money will not be used for any kinds of black market or things like buying a gun or buying some drugs or something. And I'm also not involving any of the criminal actions or something, so she wrote down that kinds of promise of statement. And the source of the funding, source of the money who would be sent to me was also scrutinized by a bank first, and after that the Korean government. And after sending this money to the United States government also scanned a kinds of transaction history of the money, and after that they allowed me to receive the money. So it took 3 or maybe 2 days at best. So it was very hard to get some money from the other country, maybe 15 years or something. But now you can freely transaction your money with the other country, including the United States, because the kinds of financial system, the international financial system has been advanced a lot, developed their system. to filter some bad money or something, bad money transaction. So they are pretty much good at differentiating the normal good money transactions and some bad money transactions. So trading financial asset has been, relatively speaking, a kind of new thing, new concept to guys like me. Trading goods or services has been really kind of old concept, maybe 300 years ago, from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So it has been really familiar things, so we can easily understand that, okay, so every transaction of goods or services will be recorded in the balance of payment because we intuitively understand that. But how to record the financial asset transactions internationally would be a kind of problematic to some of you guys. So we will put a lot of time to exemplify the transactions in financial asset in later pages. So why do people use the BOP? The reason is pretty much important. Because they can build up some policies or regulations based on the history of the BOP. BOP tells a lot of information for the market participants, including household, a firm, or even government sector. They can get a lot of useful information from the BOP so that they can make their best decision making based on information provided by the BOP. So in really smaller scope, the single economic agent like you or me, we can decide a kind of rational decision making based on some information from the BOP. When do we have to change our Korean won with the net dollar or maybe Japanese yen because we want to travel to those countries? When will be the best timing to maximize our benefit? We can decide based on the bigger flows of BOP. For the government side, they can formulate the best decision making of the combination of the monetary or fiscal or trade policy. So we'll discuss about this policy dimension in really later chapters of our course. So BOP will come back in the later part of this semester. Any question? No. Okay. Right, so I tell you that the BOP is separated by two parts. The first part is the credit side, and the other part is the debit side, as you already know from your accounting, basic accounting class. I'm really bad at it, so I have to tell you. I took my basic accounting class in my freshman year, and I got C+. So after coming back from my 2 years of Army service, I decided to retake the course because any of the C or worse grade in my transcription is not allowed at that time. I was foolish, but I decided to retake any of the bad grade courses in the third year, fourth year. So I retook basic accounting class, and I finally got the C0. So my grade was just going down. So at that time, I could really easily confirm that I'm really bad at the accounting. So, this is just my background knowledge about the accounting. But anyway, the only thing I know from my basic accounting class is that you can write down in two sides. That's the only one thing that I still remember from my accounting class. The credit transaction could be easily understood by a plus of something. What kind of things could be recorded in the credit transactions? If you have any of international transactions that involve receipt of payment from the foreign sources. So if you receive something, receive some asset, receive some money, receive some capital inflow, it will be recorded in the credit dimension. Okay? So we will specify a little bit more of the list of something that should be recorded in the credit side. If you normally export your good or services to the foreign country, then specific good or services you produce will go out of your hand, right? Will go to the other country. And as our payment, you will receive some money, right? Or a promise of payment. So if you export goods and services, you will receive the capital or financial inflow. It should be recorded or written in the credit side. Okay, that's really easy to understand. Or if you receive some gift, the money transaction. So this is market-based transaction, right? This is non-market-based transaction. As I told you, my own example from my mom, right? My mom sent money to me without the market transaction. She directly sent some money to me because I need that money. So the market did not intervene in any of transaction between my mom and me, but some money was definitely given to me. That's non-market transaction from my mom to me, and that's a kind of gift, right? So you can receive some gift or some money transfer from the foreign countries, then it will be also recorded in the credit side, okay? Because it is also receipt and it is also the receipt. The same thing. This is a market-based receipt or a kind of payment to receive, or you can also receive some money without the market mechanism, like from my mom. Those two things are pretty much easy, right? If you earn some money or if you receive some money as a result of the international transaction, it should be written in the credit side. How about the financial inflow? That should be a little bit more complicated. If somebody who is living out of this country buys some financial asset in our country, like Japanese guys in the 1970s, they export a lot of Toyota truck, so they earn a lot of dollars from the United States, and they reinvest that kinds of dollar to buy some buildings in the Manhattan. So Japanese guys buying Manhattan building is the credit of the United States, because the Japanese guys had to pay some money to buy American building, right? So the money was injected in the United States, but the real kinds of asset like Manhattan buildings are now not belong to the United States. They are owned by the Japanese. So a selling of asset to the foreign guys, and as a response, our country, this domestic country, will receive some money by selling some goods or services, like export or good. But now the objective is not goods or services, it is financial asset. If you sell your financial asset to the other country, then you will receive some money that will be also written in the credit side. Lastly, if our country's asset abroad, so you can buy some buildings in Manhattan by yourself, so you pay some money, then you go out your money to the other country. But if the market value of that kinds of building reduced because of some financial crisis or economic crisis, then your expectation to get back some money will be also reduced, right? That's the reduction of your asset value, right? That should be also written in the credit side as well. Understand everything? Okay, we'll give some example for sure. Debit is totally opposite. If you have any international transactions that involve a payment, you go out, you just throw out your money to the foreign sources, then it will be written in the debit side. So it is outflow of capital, outflow of your financial something, resources, or outflow of your money to the foreign side. So there is a kind of minus sign. Not exactly the minus sign, but you can imagine that. So you can differentiate debit side from the credit side. So you can imagine that, okay, so credit is kind of plus financial inflow, capital inflow. Debit is a minus, so capital outflow or financial outflow can be written in the BOP here. So these are representative types of positive debit transactions. So you may be a little bit complicated. There is minus, but there's positive, so what's the right thing? So you can write down the same amount of dollars or won in the debit side and the credit side. Another thing that I only know from my really bad basic accounting class was that I need to match the amount of dollar or won between the debit side and the credit side. You always need to match the total amount of credit side should be equal to the total amount of the debit side. So if this is plus, then there is also plus. So if you import any of goods or services, then you need to pay for this import action, right? So your money will go out. Instead of that, all kinds of goods or services you will own will be increased, right? So money go out, some good or services, the real things go in, it will be a debit. How about if you send your money through the transfer site or portal to your foreign friends living in the United States or Canada, it will be also going out of your pocket to the other country, so it will be also written in the debit side. Financial outflow, it will be separated by two types. First one is that if you buy your asset abroad, if you buy the building in Manhattan newly, then you need to pay some money to the original landlord of the building. So the money will go out from your pocket to the other country. So it is financial outflow, so you have to write down these kinds of money you spend to buy a building in Manhattan, living in South Korea, in debit side. With the same logic, a foreigner originally bought 3 buildings in South Korea, in Daejeon. So they spent a lot of money to Daejeon. So it was financial inflow, so it was originally written in credit side. But if that foreign landlord already having 3 buildings in the Daejeon, say one of them, then it is a reduction of that foreigner's asset in Daejeon, right? So if the landlord sells one building in Daejeon, he will get some money for the transaction. So some money goes out. So since money goes out from Daejeon to the United States, it will be written in debit side as well. Okay. I think it is not okay from some of you guys. Doesn't matter. We repeatedly practice which one is right in debit or credit. And most importantly, these kinds of details are not super important in your further study in this course. So even if you don't understand at this point, don't worry about it. We're repeatedly talking about it in one part to compensate your misunderstanding in some part of that. And also, we'll not mention at all about these kind of details in the future of the course. So you don't have to worry about it at all for any reason. So our first practice, the first principle is, I already told you, it should be written twice, once in credit, once in a debit. And the number of credit and debit should be equal each other. If we record one single economic transaction internationally, that type of action should be written 2 times, but the amount of the transaction should be equal each other. So the simplest version of international transaction could be definitely international trade of goods and services. So if you are pretty much good at exporting, so you export a good or services and receive $500 from the other country, it will be recorded firstly in the credit because goods export here. And it could be also negatively written in the financial asset because it is financial inflow, but it is negative financial inflow here. Okay, so here is 500 because there is a good export, so you receive 500 for your export activity. So you write down the plus $500 here, but also you need to write down the same amount of this $500 in the debit side because debit side automatically perceive this one as a negative one, the same money. So it is financial outflow, negative financial outflow. So in reality, it should be the financial inflow. So you write down $500 here, the same money. You understand that? I don't understand this, so you can explain to me. I'm really bad at accounting, so, and I don't think this is super important for the macroeconomics. But anyway, so we can just go through it. So double accounting example, another example. So one American guy visit in London, okay? So London is definitely not the United States territory. So now the American tourist is the foreigner in London. And she spent $200 on maybe eating something at a restaurant. So it is definitely capital outflow from United States to the British side because so it also differs. So in detail it is very complicated, so we cannot determine. But we assume that this tourist used a credit card, and the credit card was accepted in the United States. So this guy are now using the American credit card to spend some money. Then this makes sense. So if this tourist spends a lot of travel services by 200, so it is financial outflow from the United States to the United Kingdom. So you first write down $200 here, but it is also a plus financial outflow. So you write down the same amount of money here, the $200 here. The third example. So the United States is doing a lot of things to help the other countries. So this is one of them. So now economic agent is not specified by the United States government. This is not the international institution, so we can still include this action or these transactions in the part of the BOP. So $100 spent by the United States government for a just kind of donation, the foreign aid given to government of the developed countries. So it is a transfer money, right? Not a market-based transaction, but it is non-market-based transfer of money from one country to the other country. So you write down $100 of debit first, and the same money here, capital inflow here, and $100 on the credit side. So if a United States resident, or just kind of United States citizenship or non-citizenship, doesn't matter, any kind of people living in the United States can buy or sell the foreign stock, maybe the Korean foreign stock or something. Then if you buy some foreign stock from the other capital market, then capital outflow firstly happen. So you write down $100 here, but the same money should be written as a financial inflow plus financial inflow at $400 on the credit side. So you may be confused why there is the financial inflow credit $100 because the actual economic action was financial outflow decided by one resident. So they spent $400 to the other country. So actually money was going out of the United States to the other country. So you firstly understand this part, but you don't know why $400 right down here, okay? Because it could be perceived as a debt the foreign country owed to this United resident. So you have a foreign asset here. So please remember that. Increase in foreign asset in a nation. If you buy a foreign asset, which are foreign stock, which means that your foreign asset as a nation's citizenship or the people living in the nation has been increased. At the same time, where you spend $400 for buying that stock. So the first line of this accounting system indicates that you actually sent $400 to that foreign capital market to buy your foreign asset. And these $400 in credit side record that as a result of your international transaction, your overall value of foreign asset has been increased by $400. So that's the reason why you should write down twice. How about the other example? So the United States Treasury bond. Treasury bond is one of the financial assets owned by the other countries, and it was published by the United States government. United States Treasury bond of the government purchased by the foreign investor, maybe just Japanese investor, from his United States bank account. So still that foreign investor, in a point of view of the United States, so the United States is now a domestic country. This Japanese or foreign investor pays $300 to buy the domestic financial asset. So in the point of view of the United States, they receive $300 of the receipt, right? So it is capital side increased, but since your domestic financial asset has been decreased, or the domestic asset owned by foreigners has been increased, it should be also written in the debit side. So, that's a kind of double bookkeeping system that I really hate, and I will never retake this basic accounting course because it creates a lot of headache in my side. Okay, so this is the example of BOP in 2011. So it is about 13 years ago, pretty old data set, but it is good example because it is clearly shows you a kinds of transactions by category. The importance of each category is in the single BOP of a country. So there is current account. It's pretty important name, but you don't know yet. Don't worry about it. You study about the current account for sure. Current account simply means the transactions of the goods and services, the original, the classic version of international trade, goods and services transactions. So exports of goods, services, or the income. So this should be written in the credit side. If you import, you need to pay some money, so it should be written in the debit side. And the transfer. Now transfer is written in debit, which means that people living in the United States send more money to any of friends or family or the other guys living in the other countries, then they receive the transfer money from the foreign guys. So this is a negative transfers in sum, in aggregate, in the year of 2011 in the United States. So surprisingly, if you add everything, so there is plus sign and there is negative sign, so you add everything, the net capital account in this year was just negative 1, which means that it converges to the 0. And maybe this negative 1 should be a kind of statistical error in estimating or in tracking every economic activities internationally. So the point is that if you add everything from credit side to debit side in the current account, it should be a 0 in principle. How about the financial account? If United States own a lot of foreign assets abroad, the money is here in debit. And in the United States, the financial account balance was negative about the 500 unit is billions dollars, and most of these United States owned foreign asset should be belongs to the private asset, not the government side or something. So about 75% of their assets abroad was owned by some private investors. And this is credit side of financial account. The foreign owned asset in the United States was about $1,000 billion, which was really larger than the value in the debit side. So many more foreigners own American financial assets than the foreign assets owned by the United States in the year of 2011. So also, if you add everything, this debit side of financial account and this plus side, the credit side of the financial account, you add everything, it also should be 0, but there is some statistical errors in calculating, so very small number recorded here. And some other government things here. So balance of current account is now negative $466 billion. So you can interpret this final number here as, so you can make your own analysis why this negative term here, which means that in our hypothesis, the United States in this year imported more goods and services than exports. So net export should be negative. That's one reason we can imagine. The other one is that they buy more financial assets rather than sell their financial assets in this year. So the financial outflow was overwhelming than financial inflow. That should be also a part of the reason why they are negative balance of payment here. So you can analyze just category by category so that you can, okay, so the interest rate part was the main reason of this negative, the deficit of BOP in this year of the United States, or you can analyze like financial account was the main part of this kind of negative BOP. So anyway, the BOP of or real nation in a year can be written like this. There are many categories, but you know, you will be very familiar with each of them at the end of semester. And we will go through specific, a little bigger category inside the BOP. We will firstly look at the current account, and after that we will go to the financial account. And we'll also go through the other part of the BOP at the end of this chapter. Any question before going to the capital account? Already adjusted? All right. So we'll stop here and we'll go to the first page of the capital account index time, right? Because we have little time to start the new thing here. Okay, thank you.